Welcome to Omni episode 97. It's June 29th, 2026, and as always, we're covering what happened from every angle. New week, fresh perspectives. Let's see what happened over the weekend and what's developing today. A mass shooting in northern Germany has killed 5 people, triggering a major police operation and highlighting immediate risks to public safety in the area. Police in Stade reported multiple fatalities after shots were fired in the city. Authorities described the situation as dynamic and urged residents to stay away from the area. A large operation remains underway. German authorities have focused on containing the immediate threat and securing the scene. Local media have emphasized the rapid response and the need for clear public information during active incidents. National outlets have placed the event in the context of recent violent crimes in the country. Law enforcement agencies stress that quick containment and public alerts protect lives when seconds count. They note that visible operations can deter further harm and allow evidence collection while the scene is fresh. Critics of frequent high-visibility responses argue that such tactics can heighten community anxiety without addressing root causes of violence. They point out that long-term prevention requires sustained investment in social services rather than reactive policing alone. What details about the shooter and motive remain unconfirmed. Shifting now to developments in the United Kingdom. Andy Burnham delivered a speech in Manchester, pledging to relocate significant government functions northward. He described the move as the largest rebalancing of power in UK history. Questions about specific tax measures were not answered in detail during the address. Supporters of regional devolution argue that concentrating decision-making in London has left northern economies behind for decades. They say moving institutions and budgets closer to affected communities improves accountability and local growth. Opponents contend that such shifts risk fragmenting national policy and increasing administrative costs without guaranteed economic gains. Treasury officials have historically warned that rapid relocation of functions can disrupt service delivery in the short term. Regional leaders counter that gradual centralization has already produced uneven outcomes across the UK, and that targeted redistribution can correct long-standing imbalances. Everything turns on whether the proposed transfers include binding fiscal authority or remain advisory. Which specific powers would move under the proposed plan? Next, the European Commission has announced a €3 customs charge on parcels valued under €150. The measure targets low-value imports from platforms such as Temu and Shein. Officials aim to reduce competitive pressure on European retailers. European retailers and high street advocates welcome the change as a way to level the playing field with overseas sellers. They argue that the previous exemption allowed foreign platforms to undercut local businesses on price alone. Consumer groups have raised concerns that the fee could raise costs for everyday items without addressing broader supply chain issues. The Commission states that the exemption was originally designed for truly negligible shipments and has been scaled far beyond its intent. Free trade proponents respond that even modest fees can reduce consumer choice and slow cross-border commerce, particularly for smaller sellers. How will the charge be collected at checkout? Microsoft stock has fallen sharply, putting the company on track for its worst month since 2000. Investors are questioning how the firm will perform amid rapid AI development and changing market conditions. The decline has erased hundreds of billions in market value. Technology analysts focused on fundamentals point to uncertainty over AI monetization timelines as the main driver of selling. They note that high valuations built during earlier enthusiasm are now being tested against actual revenue growth. Long-term shareholders argue that the company's cloud infrastructure and enterprise relationships provide a durable base even during periods of volatility. Portfolio managers tracking large-cap tech have highlighted the concentration risk when a few firms dominate index performance. Company executives have maintained that continued investment in AI infrastructure will eventually translate into higher returns, though they acknowledge near-term margin pressures. What specific AI-related costs are weighing on margins? The new Supergirl movie recorded a disappointing opening weekend despite a reported $170 million production budget. Reviews described the lead performance as lackluster. Studio expectations for a major summer release were not met. Industry observers tracking box office trends note that audience interest in superhero films has become more selective after several recent underperformers. They point to review scores and marketing reach as key variables in first weekend results. Studio executives have historically viewed individual film performance as part of a larger slate strategy rather than a standalone verdict on any single title. Critics of franchise fatigue argue that repetitive storytelling has reduced willingness to pay premium prices for familiar characters. Defenders of the model respond that proven intellectual property still offers the clearest path to global distribution and merchandising revenue when executed well. Which marketing elements appear to have connected or missed with audiences? Comcast announced plans to separate its media and technology operations into distinct publicly traded entities through a tax-free spin-off. NBC Universal and Sky would form one company while the remaining businesses form the other. The move is intended to give each unit greater strategic focus. Investors focused on media assets have welcomed the clarity of separate valuations. They argue that distinct management teams can pursue different growth paths more effectively. Some analysts caution that transaction costs and transitional complexity could offset near-term gains if execution falters. Corporate strategists note that spinning off divisions allows capital markets to price each business according to its own risk profile and prospects. Reports indicate thousands of foreign nationals have departed South Africa in recent weeks. Anti-immigrant groups had set a June 30th deadline for departures. Some Congolese refugees described leaving homes and businesses after protests turned violent. Government officials have stressed the importance of maintaining public order while protecting legal residents. Humanitarian organizations have called for clearer pathways for those with valid claims to remain. Security agencies argue that uncontrolled migration can strain public services and social cohesion when integration support is limited. Refugee advocates counter that sudden deadlines can force people into dangerous returns without due process or assessment of individual circumstances. What legal status options remain available to those still in the country? Slovenia's new government removed the rainbow flag from the culture ministry early in June. Pride events continued amid both public support and visible opposition. Observers are tracking how the change in official symbols affects daily life for LGBTQ+ residents. Supporters of the flag removal describe it as a return to neutral state symbolism rather than an endorsement of any particular group. They argue governments should avoid appearing to favor specific social causes. LGBTQ+ organizations view the removal as a signal that reduces visibility and can embolden hostile attitudes. Civil society groups monitoring policy shifts note that symbolic actions often precede or follow concrete legal changes. NASA is developing a mission to prevent a valuable space telescope from re-entering Earth's atmosphere uncontrolled. The plan involves rendezvous and stabilization techniques. Success would preserve scientific instruments that remain operational. Space agency engineers describe the operation as technically demanding but within current capabilities when planned carefully. They note that similar servicing missions have extended the life of other observatories. Budget overseers have questioned whether the cost justifies the scientific return compared with funding new instruments. Mission planners argue that preserving existing assets avoids the full expense of replacement while maintaining data continuity. Fiscal watchdogs respond that opportunity costs must be weighed against competing priorities in a constrained budget environment. What technical hurdles remain before launch? Heat waves and extreme weather are increasing operational challenges for AI data centers, including grid strain and higher insurance costs. Operators are assessing how climate patterns affect reliability and expansion plans. The sector's rapid growth has placed new demands on power infrastructure. Energy planners emphasize that data center demand requires coordinated upgrades to generation and transmission capacity. They argue that without such planning, reliability risks rise during peak weather events. Technology companies counter that efficiency improvements and on-site generation can mitigate many of these pressures while maintaining growth. Infrastructure analysts point out that siting decisions made years ago did not always account for today's climate variability. Actress Dame Penelope Keith, known for roles in The Good Life and To the Manor Born, has died aged 86 after a battle with cancer. Tributes have highlighted her comic timing and long career in British television. Colleagues described her as a defining figure in classic sitcoms. Broadcasters and fellow performers have recalled her ability to bring warmth and precision to ensemble casts. They note that her characters became cultural touchstones for multiple generations. Some commentators have observed that the style of gentle observational comedy she helped popularize has become less common in contemporary programming. Archivists argue that preserving recordings of such series maintains an important record of changing social attitudes and humor. Actress Davinia Taylor posted a social media complaint alleging she was refused entry to a train at London Euston despite arriving minutes early. She described staff behavior as unhelpful. The incident occurred as she attempted to travel to Birmingham. Passenger rights advocates have used the post to discuss consistency in enforcement of boarding cutoff times. They note that clear communication from staff can reduce disputes. Rail operators have pointed to safety rules that require gates to close before departure to maintain schedules. Customer service specialists argue that visible enforcement of deadlines protects overall punctuality for the majority of travelers. Now, to really understand the devolution story, most coverage assumes that relocating offices or budgets automatically delivers stronger local decision-making. In reality, devolution transfers specific legal competences, such as aspects of transport, housing, or skills policy, while central government retains control over taxation, welfare, and foreign affairs. The process requires primary legislation in Westminster, followed by the creation of new funding formulas and accountability lines that can take years to stabilize. Knowing this, when you hear claims that a single speech will immediately rebalance the country, you can check whether concrete legislative steps and fiscal transfers have actually been proposed. Next time you see a headline about moving government functions, ask which exact powers are named in draft bills, how Barnett formula adjustments will work, and what historical transfers show about delivery timelines versus political promises. Tomorrow, watch for updates on how the European customs charge on small parcels is being implemented at checkout. That wraps up today's Omni View. Remember, the best informed people read more than one perspective. If this show helps you do that, share it with someone who values fair coverage. See you tomorrow. And if you'd rather watch than listen, find us on YouTube at Nara Network. Links in the show notes. And before you go, this show is part of the Nara Network, a family of daily podcasts on tech, science, and markets, each one a short, sharp briefing you can finish on the commute. If today earned its place in your feed, here's your next listen: modern investing techniques, modern strategies for Canadian and US investors. Find every show free at naranetwork.com. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.